Well, hey everybody that's listening. I know I haven't been putting any posts out in the past couple of days. I've just had some interesting developments come across, and I've been processing those and reflecting on things. So I just want to say that I'm glad to see that people are watching, and I'm glad that some people are, after years of not speaking to me, that they are reaching out in however manner or fashion that they see fit, and I appreciate that a lot. And so what I just want to say is that I'm going to continue doing what I'm doing, because at the end of the day, I might have said some things in previous posts or in previous lives, that have hurt people and or caused chaos or caused some kind of a disruption. And I'm not going to apologize for those things, just because I don't feel bad that I did it. I might have shined some light on some folks, and they don't like looking at themselves, I think. And so everybody wants to blame somebody for something, but I've kind of grown past that. And one of the ways that I did that is because I do my shadow work. And one thing about shadow work, if you don't know what it is, shadow work is a time that you take to self-reflect on your life, on your patterns, on your relationships, just everything about your life, and you really get down to the nitty-gritty, very core base of why certain patterns exist in your life, or why you are only attracting certain types of people, or why you can't seem to promote in jobs, or whatever it is. The biggest thing for shadow work is to identify the patterns that are creating blockages or derail your life, because they're there. And it's really not hard to sit down and to recognize your patterns if you're really honest with yourself. And I've it's been a long time being really honest with myself about a lot of things. And so all I really want to say on, as far as, anything else that I say, in regards to a personal story or, a self-reflection that I'm trying to share with other people, is that if, everybody has a story and everybody has their story. And if I'm a villain in your story, well, if you're listening, I'm a villain in mine too. So, I'm not a victim of anything other than, the karmic repercussions of my own bad decisions. And I realize that, I know that, and I live that every day. And so, like I said in the beginning of this thing, I don't have anything to lose at this point. There's no amount of what anybody can say to me or do to me or whatever. I'm a victim of my own bad decisions, and whatever that I do deserve or don't deserve, because, because of that, is what I do or don't deserve. And so just remember, if I'm a villain in yours, I was a villain in my story first. And I know that through shadow work. And so if you sit down and you start going through your patterns and you realize, okay, well, we'll take a starting point of like, okay, well, I'm doing really good. And then, you can't ever like hold that level. Well, you got to think of what comes along while you're at that level that causes you to stray out of a healthy pattern into a bad pattern. And a lot of times you'll find it's your environment. It is the people that you surround yourself with. It is the habits that you've created. It's accumulation of all of those things sometimes. Sometimes it's just one bad decision, And the thing about decisions is that you never really know if they're going to be bad decisions until they're made and followed through. The first time you you make a decision to do something, that first time is a mistake. You know, if it doesn't work out the way you wanted it to, then that's a mistake. When you continue to choose those things, you know, let's say you start out on a pattern of good and you get there, and then, oh, you know, you get a promotion at work and it's great. And so you decide, oh, well, you know, I had quit drinking or whatever, and you decide to have a drink, you know, to celebrate. Well, you know, that drinking, it triggers other things, you know, and then slowly but surely, you know, you just got this promotion at work and everything should be great, but now you're back into this habit of drinking every day or whatever substance abuse or, you know, whatever it is. You're drinking every day, and you see where things, you know, you're not getting up on time to get to work, you're not going to bed early enough, you're not getting enough rest, you know, you are grouchy. You know, maybe you work in customer service and you can't be grouchy. You know, I don't know how many people of you've ever worked in customer service, but it takes a lot of patience. So you're losing your patience, and now you got people looking at you at work like, man, maybe we shouldn't have promoted this girl, you know, maybe, you know, whatever. And so they maybe make the decision to demote you. Well, that doesn't really add to your you know, your headed up the slope factor. You know, now you have, you know, created a situation, you know, just of not being able to control yourself drinking, and now you're headed back downhill, back down to rock bottom or whatever you want to call it. Okay, and so you get down there and you realize, okay, well, man, I shouldn't have been drinking. I shouldn't have been, you know, doing this or seeing this person or, you know, whatever you were doing. And so once you're able to identify these patterns, be it whatever, you know, a pattern of substance abuse, a pattern of lying, a pattern of, you know, being a homewrecker, or, you know, whatever it is. I'm not here to judge nobody, really. I'm just throwing these examples out there. And, you know, like, so let's say, for example, if you are in a pattern of relationships, and you, let's say you start dating guys, and every single guy that you date, it just seems like they just ended up being a bum. Well, maybe the next guy that you meet, you should take those patterns that you started off with the previous few guys that didn't work out, and maybe make like a little, you know, like a checklist or something, you know, okay, well, does he have a job? How long has he had the job? Can he, you know, is he putting in effort, you know, whatever it is. And if you can't balance it out, you know, and that's a pattern, then that's what you got to figure out to fix, you know. For example, in my last relationship, and I still have a lot of love for this guy, but he had established a pattern, and, you know, the only thing that you can do with when you are involved in other people's patterns, is to, you know, try to put up boundaries, and, you know, and if nothing ever fails and the pattern continues with a person or with the job or, you know, whatever it is, the only thing that you can do is to remove yourself from the pattern, because you can't control people. You can't control what they do, how they think, how they feel. You can't control that. Only you can just control what you do. And so instead of, you know, becoming like a pattern enabler like I was, you know, you remove yourself from the pattern and you go create your own pattern. And if you do that, you know, based on the foundations that you have are good foundations. They're foundations that allow for growth and stability and all the things that you need for you know, expansion, then, you know, you'll be fine. But if you know, you can't really begin a new pattern unless you sit down and do your shadow work. And, you know, and admit to yourself, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't drink, so don't drink anymore, you know, or don't do drugs anymore, or don't, you know, sleep around with a bunch of people anymore, or whatever the pattern is. You know, if you just stop that pattern, you know, right then and there within yourself, and start creating patterns, you know, that don't include those things, those, you know, those, I don't really know what to call them, just the things that don't make out for good patterns, then you'll slowly see that, you know, with a little bit of redirection and a new pattern based on things that you do want, then that's what you'll attract. And that's kind of like what the law of attraction is. And so if you sit in a toxic environment you're never going to attract anything that's healthy. You're not going to attract, decent people, with good morals and, and good judgment and, things like that. If you're sitting in an environment where the whole environment seems to be anything but that, and encourages, in fact, the bad patterns that you adopt. If you don't sit and do your shadow work and understand your own damn patterns, then you're not going to get anywhere any way other than the way you're already headed, And so, here recently I removed myself from a pattern, and I'm sitting, in a much better environment where there's not all that toxicity that I was just surrounded in, and things are starting to look up for me, things are moving a little bit faster for me. I've been here for just a couple of months. I've already got insurance. I'm fixing to go get an ID next week. These things that I was trying to do in that toxic environment that I was in that just for some reason never would work out, would not line up for me. It's all lining up, and that's another thing that, when you do your shadow work, things will start coming back into alignment for you. Once you do the shadow work and you identify the patterns and you make a conscious effort to change the patterns, things will start coming back into alignment. But just know this, though, through the shadow work, you've got to hold on to the things that that you have done and the things that you're capable of, and you only hold on to them with the amount that it takes to remember where those patterns took you before, and that you don't want to go back there. You don't want to return to that rock bottom place. And so remember your patterns, and remember that if you are like me and you just make constant bad decisions, then, you sometimes just got to sit down with yourself and be like, okay, well, look, Leslie, if you wouldn't, do this and do this and do this and do this, well, you would have this and this and this and this. Okay. And so, finally I've decided that a new environment was the best thing for me. And so here I am, and, it seems to be lining up pretty good, so I can't really argue with anybody coming out, from my old life, and speaking their piece, and, but just know that, that I do take all that into consideration. And I'm not going to sit here and argue with anybody on how they view me or how they see me, because that's the reality that you have of me, and the only way I'm going to be able to change that is to not promote that reality for anybody. And so, that's all I'm really trying to do, not necessarily trying to harm anybody, but I know that I am a light, and just like when you walk into a living room and you turn the lamp on, you don't get to tell that lamp what it shines on, and so if by me being a light has shined upon some things that some people might find triggering, or, maybe didn't make them really look or feel very good about themselves or put them in a good light, well, I can't help that, Nothing that I'm saying is a lie. Nothing that I'm saying is not something that didn't happen. Just like somebody else saying that I can't sit here and I'm not going to gaslight somebody into thinking that that's not something that happened. Just because I don't remember it happening or whatever, and especially not something that, but anyways. So, sit down and do your shadow work, sit down and really, really just get down and dirty with yourself and be like, well, you know what? You do sleep with other people's husbands, or you do, I do these things, and whatever it is, whatever it is that you do. If you just really sit down and have a good reckoning with yourself about it, then I think that, You'll find once you eliminate those things, which also coincides with self-love, a lot of those things you'll find that you've fallen into patterns of doing, are not really usually things. At least in my case, they're not things, that I would necessarily love myself over. And so why would anybody else love me over that? You know what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't have to necessarily be about love, but just about acceptance. It's all about what people want to accept in their lives, and that's everybody's prerogative. And that's for everybody's, what you do to protect you and yours is what you do to protect you and yours. And I'm not going to come up against that, for anybody, but just sit down and do your shadow work and think about the things that, you get you rope yourself into patterns about, and try to be accountable for those things as best that you can. Sometimes accountability is a little too, what is it called? I forget what the phrase is, but anyways, it's like a little too late to be accountable now kind of thing, and that usually involves how somebody else feels about you, I'll take accountability for everything that I did. I'm going to own it, and that's what accountability is owning it. And, but I'm not going to let it ruin the person that I am, at my foundation, I make bad decisions, and thank goodness that all the bad decisions that I've made, I don't have, I haven't spent any time in prison. I haven't, got like a mile long, rap sheet of arrests, or, I'm not dying necessarily like, from some crazy, like an accident or something I got into, or, I'm very blessed, is what I'm trying to say. I'm really blessed, that my bad decisions have not rendered me completely incapable of being, in a new life, and I'm really appreciative for spirit, for that. And it all goes round, it's all a cycle. And so, but if you don't like the cycle that you're on, I'm trying to help, with steps on how I'm fixing it and within myself, along my spiritual journey, and hoping that, my messages get out there to other people, so, if you're going to take anything away from this, then do your shadow work, work on the dark part of yourself, so that you know how to balance everything, everybody's both, everybody's light, everybody's dark, I'll probably talk about balances, here pretty quick about how to balance things. And, and I'm, need to shout out to, what is it? Lita Beta Boda Butt, I think, is a little dog thing. And so I'm giving a shout out to her, and to her longevity. From what I understand, she's a pretty old dog, but apparently she likes listening to my videos. So, shout out to her for sure. So, anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and close this video. So, thanks for all you eavesdroppers for listening to me while I sit around talking to myself in the dark.